Yeah, films. We watched some films. Now let's talk about those films.
So, Blew My Mind is about a seemingly normal teenage girl faces overwhelming body transformations that put her existence into question. And it's directed by Lisa Brillman. And it is a ride. It's like a time. It's like it takes its time with the situations that are happening. So you don't
Mhm.
feel like I didn't feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed most of the time. I was just kind of there. And that was
Mhm.
fine. So Blew My Mind is a typical coming of age story about a young girl who tries to find her tribe. She dabbles in shoplifting, she kisses boys and girls, and she feels so different that she questions whether or not she may be adopted. Because parents just don't understand.
Yeah.
Except her parents really don't, because these aren't your typical growing pains that Mia is going through. No, these are a bit more aquatic in nature because Mia is slowly becoming a mermaid, and this transformation includes gills, a tail, and a hankering for raw fish.
Yeah, but not like
Gills.
sushi, like live.
Yeah, like her pet, like a pet.
Yeah. Like, was alive 2 seconds ago and is now in your stomach.
Yeah, exactly. So, this film reminded me a bit of the coming of age film starring Evan Rachel Wood titled 13. And that
Mm,
film really shook me as a young girl because identified really strongly with Evan's character, who was this like outsider who grew up like incredibly close with her mom and then like in trying to like rebel and like find her own way, becomes fixated on this other girl and tries questionable, dangerous things to fit in.
mm.
And I don't know if Mia's story would be as impactful to young girls as 13 was for like girls like me, but it does feature a lot of the same tropes and so could very easily be impactful for young girls. I just don't know if that's the intended audience, like,
Yeah.
or if it really is like us looking back and thinking like, wow, that's a wild time. And it's another thing is that I do not think it's specifically about puberty either. I think there's a lot of elements to this film outside of just puberty that
Mhm.
make it even more interesting when you think about its audience. So, in this story, Mia is a new girl at school and she's looking to belong. So she falls into a clique of cool girls who talk about giving their boyfriends blowjobs, play choking games, and skip school to drink wine coolers, as you're one to do as a young person. Um, I do remember the choking game. Like I didn't play them. I remember hearing about when that happened, and I think I was like either in high school or going into college, and it was like
Yeah.
a thing where kids were like choking themselves to faint, and that's how they got high. And my mom was
If
like,
I
"That's
remembered
crazy."
my childhood, maybe I would remember that, but I
If
don't.
you remembered
I'm
anything
not
for
high
childhood.
school, middle school
Yeah.
time. There was a time in which, like, I was just like, "I'm gone," mentally, and then I came back and I was an adult, and I was like, "Whoa." So, I believe that probably was a thing also.
Gotcha, gotcha. So Mia fits in pretty well, like, immediately because she's a pretty cool girl to herself. Like,
Mhm,
she wasn't, like, a nerd that didn't fit in, like, she just was new. Like, that's
mhm,
really what it was going on for her. And she begins to grow close with these other girls, specifically one of them, Gianna, who just happens to be the epitome of cool girl.
mhm,
Um, and there's a moment where Mia and Gianna, share a kiss, and
mhm.
more than a few lingering stares, and they also endure some dangerous situations from Gianna almost dying by drowning, and Mia getting into a very uncomfortable situation at a party, which I'll talk
Yeah,
about later. And they help each other through it and bond over a lot of things, which is really, I felt like I wanted more of that relationship.
yeah,
Um, but it kind of seemed like second fiddle to she's becoming a mermaid, which is like totally fair, totally fair. This film features some truly uncomfortable and horrifying things. Some of those horrifying things are the special effects of Mia's transformation, such as her gills, or when she tried to cut the skin between her toes that had begun to web. Like that stuff was really gross.
yeah,
And it's just like very squeamish. You're just like, "Ugh."
yeah,
But other horror in this film is more situational, such as young Mia meeting with an older man from a dating app at a hotel.
mhm,
It's super uncomfortable. I did value that her friends like they're acquaintances, like, they're not really friends yet, but they
Yeah.
waited, they stayed. Like, they didn't
Yeah.
talk her out of it, which is, like, that's rough.
Yeah.
But they did at least have some wherewithal to know that, like, this is not a good situation for her to just be alone in.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of many scenes that are just like this, where you see Mia making very questionable decisions where she's literally just trying to find herself. And the way to do that is to use her body and figure it out. Um, which is sad, but I think, like, I know I've been there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, each piece of her transformation feels like a representation for something bigger, for a challenge young and grown girls work to overcome. And in an article on Variety titled Blew My Mind review, promising coming of age body horror debut by Jessica Keong, they explain the dichotomous, monstrous transformation that mirrors real world challenges for young girls. So, from her impulsive eating of the pet fish, she gulps down a glass of salt water, a trick bulimia sufferers use to induce vomiting, which makes me think of Melanie Martinez's Orange Juice song.
Mhm.
She lashes out at her mother with a physical force that she doesn't seem to know she has. She develops a sudden awareness of a physical abnormality that her doctor insists she must have had since birth, which gives me really strong body dysmorphia vibes.
Yeah.
If she did actually have these things since birth and just like doesn't associate it with herself. And she cuts away at herself in a way that explicitly evokes self harm. So there's a lot of layers to her experience that can be very easily translated to uh, real issues that young girls are facing.
Mhm.
Specifically in our relationship to our body and at such a delicate time when it is changing and doesn't look like what we had grown so used to. And also, as we've mentioned quite a few times, specifically in this series, you start to learn that it isn't really yours anymore, and that other people feel like it belongs to them.
Yeah, and I guess, like, also, like, not feeling like home in their body, like feeling like it maybe isn't the right body for them, etc.
Yeah.
There's lots of things there.
'Cause it's, like, changing and I think, like, specifically, puberty can be a really triggering moment for people who have body dysmorphia, because those are, like, these confirmations of being in the wrong body,
Mhm.
whereas, like, before that, we're kinda, like, gender neutral to a degree, like, the parts that define what society sees as gender aren't happening
Yeah.
like before puberty, like ladies don't have their breasts yet, or like you don't have hair in certain
Yeah,
places.
the hormones have not activated to push you in a direction that you don't wanna be.
Yeah. So like once you're like in the middle of puberty, it could be really triggering if you understand that this isn't the body that you see yourself as having or
Mhm.
wanting or feeling at home in, and so it's like you're forced into that, and that's like so it can be monstrous, like your body
Mhm.
is a monster at that point. It's becoming this thing, this creature, that isn't anything that you had expected or wanted, and people don't seem to understand, and that could be a whole layer of why her because like on the surface when you're watching the film, like her parents don't understand, and I think that's super weird, and they're not acknowledging like her cries for attention and like regarding am I adopted or not. Like she gets really because she's like there's no way that you don't know about me being a mermaid and are also my parents. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. But like, if you think about people who might not feel comfortable in their body or are in this wrong body, they might have a similar thing too, where it's just like, this is so insane. Like, why is no one acknowledging
Yeah.
how absurd this transformation is? And sometimes it's not actually like you're growing a tail. You're just grown the parts you didn't want to grow. And so Mia clearly feels alien in her own skin, and she fights to remove the abnormalities, the changes in her body that set her apart from the image of a girl that she is trying to perform this
Mhm.
whole time. And she hides these changes and concerns even from Gianna in fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Um, she needs Gianna to see her and to care for her because that's literally the only person who really does. And
Yeah.
so, even when things get really, really hairy and scary, she and scaly, she keeps that from Gianna, which is pretty detrimental at some point. But beyond the horrors of the mermaid transformation, we do have this young girl who is struggling to figure out who she is, and she clearly gets no love and support at home.
Yeah.
She is abusive towards her mother and uncaring towards her father. And while both of them treat her like a stranger in her own home, at other times they treat her like a lion in a cage.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with her, and instead of trying to figure that out, they just ignore it. Which
Yeah.
is not how you deal with that. And the only moments that she really gets to explore herself are the soft, intimate, and quiet moments that she has with Gianna. And when the other girls are gone and it's just the two of them, they can confide in one another. They swap childhood trauma, which helps them to shape their current actions and needs for attention. But even that relationship isn't enough, and Mia continues to hide her changing body and concerns from Gianna and instead lashes out at the world by putting her own body at risk. And spoilers for the rest of this. um, spoilers because the ending is really quite it is why like it's so hard to talk about this film,
Yeah.
because I think it was doing a really great job until the ending, and then I was like, what are we doing? So in a really truly harrowing, unsettling, and stomach turning scene that we quite honestly could have done without, at least like the extent to which it
Continued.
happens,
Yeah.
we could have inferred. We are smart.
Yeah.
But Mia finds herself at an adult party full of predatory men. And in her attempt to feel something and to have and simultaneously release control, she falls into their hands and is sexually assaulted by many men at once.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting. It did remind me a little bit of Thelma, the
Okay.
film that we watched during queer horror about a girl who had like
Yes,
telekinesis or
yes,
whatever.
yes.
And she was in similar like situations where she was not in control and you didn't know what was happening,
Yeah.
specifically sexually. Not to this degree though, but she is saved by Gianna, and this spurs her even further into her depression and misery, resulting in a final transformation that leaves Mia with an enormous mermaid tail and a flooded apartment.
Yeah.
Um, or house. I don't really know how, but this is like uh Switzerland or something, Sweden, maybe one of
Yeah, I
those.
think it's just an
Um,
apartment.
Yeah, so in the same article by Kyung, they expressed disappointment in the ending of a film that, for a bulk of its running time, had some promise. And they say the demons of adolescence that so much of the imagery evokes are powerful and dangerous because they are imaginary. Anorexia, negative body image, self harm, and the joyless promiscuity and sexual degradation that Mia pursues are the kinds of heartbreaking punishments that young girls inflict on their bodies for differing in ways that often only they perceive from some notional ideal of womanly perfection. Everybody feels like a freak at this age, and it doesn't seem an especially helpful conclusion to have the story confirm that freakishness and to suggest that the solution for Mia is self imposed exile from the people who, however distractedly, love her. Having created a striking and potent allegory and blew my mind and explored it with grace, seriousness, and exceptional craft, Ruhlman doesn't seem to know quite what to do with it by the end, except to suggest that the cost of self acceptance is vast, eternal, oceanic loneliness. And I think for all the metaphors in grappling sexuality, body image, and identity, it left me terribly upset in the end because I found myself asking what we're learning from this film. Where the lore left us with a cautionary tale of love, Blew My Mind left us with melancholic resignation. When decides to enter the sea, that's what she does. She has this tale. She's like, I'm too different to exist here. I have to go be alone in the sea. And it was really upsetting because I was like, you don't know other mermaids. Like the ocean is huge. The
Yeah.
oceans are huge. You don't speak fish. Like what it like you are like condemning yourself to be alone forever. And like you're leaving the one person that cares about you. You haven't really told your parents anything. So they just have a flooded apartment and you're just gone. And so it's really stressful to like see her go through all that, grapple with who she is, and then should just give up and come to this conclusion that like if you're different, you should leave, you should go
Yeah.
away.
There was also like this hint that after reading that article about lore that really resonated with me, and that like if this character, like if the mermaid exists possibly as a coding for the trans identity experience, and thinking of how many trans teens kill themselves,
Mm,
that the going into the ocean could also represent that, which is like really devastating as well.
yeah. And
Um,
and I mean, it was just so hopeless and traumatizing, especially after we as an audience have endured so much alongside Mia,
mhm,
and like a lot of the very problem, like you really feel for her. Like she is putting herself in a
mhm,
lot of dangerous situations and she really does feel alone. And she has this one friend. And that's what it's like, because Gianna's there with her. So if it is like, an analogy for unaliving yourself, then Gianna is complicit in that action, which just makes me think of the the girl who like texted her boyfriend and told him to like unalive
mm,
himself. And then he did, and then
yeah,
she was in court because
yeah,
you're complicit in that. So that's like even more upsetting, like that. And imagine how Gianna feels to feel like I'm not enough.
yeah.
Like there's so many levels to that, but um, I just really feel like she just felt like she was like, "If you're different, the only answer is to be outcasts, and that no one can love us when we are this way, and that
Mhm.
we can't even give them a chance."
Yeah, it was a really devastating ending that really like threw the plot away. I would agree. Like it's just you are landing in this space that you don't really get any resolve. And I mean, true, life sometimes does that,
Mhm.
but I don't know. It just seemed like there was just so much chaos and pain that took place through the entire sequence of that film that I don't know what a better ending would have been. But specifically because it was like a mermaid transformation, so I don't know what the solution would have been. But it was definitely like it ended really devastatingly, and where like you don't feel like a good thing happened. You don't feel like she
Yeah.
like won. There was any kind of resolve. If anything, it was just like all that neglect and um like other people perceiving you as if you don't matter is accurate. So just go into the ocean forever.
Yeah, help
Um
them by removing
yeah,
yourself from this
disappearing. Yeah.
equation.
Which is such like a problematic and upsetting
Yeah, and if their
viewpoint.
intended audience is young girls who or young people who are going through similar experiences of any of those things that we named, like bulimia, anorexia, body dysmorphia, depression, or just like trans identity, even any of those things. Like if you're experiencing
Blatant
that, and
neglect.
yeah, and then you see this film.
Yeah, it doesn't provide you with like a solution for yourself. And that's why I agree. I think it was a film that was intended for adults, maybe looking back on their life experiences, just because I feel like there were a lot of sequences in there where, like, while we could admit that teenagers do sometimes engage in sexual behavior,
Mhm.
that like there were a lot of very graphically violent things that happened that like I would hope that we wouldn't be showing to young teenagers.
Yeah, like, an
Um,
encouraging in any way. Like, it wasn't ever made to be a positive, I would
yeah,
say, but it's still, yeah, I mean, this isn't Euphoria,
yeah.
like, Euphoria is so very obvious about being like, this is, like, it's excessive, but it's here to be negative. Like, you're not supposed to
Yeah, like
be
you're not
thinking
supposed to be
this is
like,
good.
I want to do this too.
This makes you afraid of children and to second guess if you really need that aspirin for this headache. Like, you're like, "I
Yeah,
don't know."
yeah, it's very Gen Z, and it's like the world is in fire and dying, so let's do
Yeah.
drugs, maybe.
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah.
watched enough of Euphoria to have strong opinions
That's what
or
it's
know
like. You
enough
were right,
about
you
it,
were correct.
but that was my guess
Good job.
of what it's about. Oh my god! But yeah, I totally agree. Like, it was a really devastating ending that like didn't leave you with anything overtly concrete to take away with you. Where you're just like, all right, well, I'm bummed. Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. This film did surprise me, and like there were lots of things I did really like about it, so that was cool.
Mhm.
Like I ended up enjoying it more than I expected up until like the end.
Yeah, I also
Um,
enjoyed it. And even in the end, it was just like I was like, "What?" Um